the home of the common Joe and the common Sally in the know, even more so than all those media talking heads. Back in the saddle again. And riding back in on the saddle, what do I hear out there? I hear old Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, telling everybody out there to listen to, stop expanding. No more expansion, says Greg Sankey. I'm like, I'm an SEC guy, but wasn't you the one that started all this expansion? Let's talk about it. Finally, I'm back in the saddle again. That's the song of the day. Back in the saddle again by Aerosmith. This is the OCF, that's Outlaw of College Football, also known as JPC. That stands for Jesse Paul Clark on Facebook, spelled JSSC without the I. Also on Twitter at OCF Productions. Yeah, been off for about a week now. Been having a little bit of a toothache here. Putting some Ambisol on it. If you guys and gals out there got any kind of home remedies that I can use to put on this tooth until I can make it to the dentist, feel free to drop it in the comment section because that would sure help me out. But I saw a podcast by a buddy of mine, Kuz's Corner with Justin Walker. Check him out. It's a great college podcast. He does a lot of West Virginia stuff, but he also touches on a few things here and there outside of West Virginia football that's pretty interesting, like this topic today. About Greg Sankey. I will throw up some graphs here off and on where Greg Sankey was on Josh Pate's show, or he wasn't on Josh Pate's show, he was on Paul Finebaum's show, and Josh Pate basically gave us a rundown and decimated what he thought came out of what Greg Sankey was saying. Greg Sankey, from what I can decimate from it, now Josh Pate was a little more nicer than what I'm going to be, but what I decimate from this, bottom line, is that maybe Greg Sankey wants the expansion thing to stop now because he sees the Big 12 and the Big 10 going nationwide with their conferences. Now, he made a statement and alluded to the fact that they've been more geographically correct in their expansions. They've been going state by state, piece by piece, whereas the Big 10 just jumped straight out to California and snagged the two big moneymakers out there from the Pac-12. And now you got some murmurings about the ACC with Florida State and Clemson mainly chirping about, talking about trying to find some loophole to get out of the ACC. Automatically you assume that they would probably go to the SEC, but that's not necessarily the case, and Greg knows this, I think. Greg knows that if there's one conference out there that could actually stand up to the SEC and maybe go toe-to-toe with them as far as money and offering certain things and perks, it would be the Big Ten. As a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think the deal the Big Ten has with Fox is more lucrative than the SEC deal with ESPN. So obviously, the Big Ten has just as much money, if not more money, than the SEC, which brings up a lot of interesting thoughts for me. I mean, now, nobody's really touched on this yet, but is it possible that maybe there's a couple of teams in the SEC that may not be too happy with the addition of Texas and Oklahoma? Probably just one team in particular, that being Texas A&M. Now, Missouri is sort of in a geographical no man's land, so to speak, a geographical purgatory, right smack dab in the middle of the United States. They're not south, they're not north, they're not east, they're not west, not really. They're just right smack dab in the middle. So basically they could go to one of three conferences, maybe even four, if they really wanted to. And back in the days, you know, Missouri wanted to go to the Big Ten. That was their first choice. People forget that. They didn't want the SEC at first. They wanted the Big Ten, and they were going to the Big Ten until Nebraska swooped in and took their Willy Wonka golden ticket right out from underneath them. So while Josh and Kuz and Paul Finebaum and all of them were thinking about, hey, Greg just wants the expansion to stop, and maybe the only questioning thing that we can do here is question Greg's motives. But I don't think it's just Greg's motives anymore. I've been hearing some murmurings that Texas A&M and Missouri, now a lot of people were saying it was Texas A&M and Oklahoma State that wanted to go to the Big Ten possibly. But from what I'm hearing, because Missouri wanted it before, and Missouri feels a little out of place in the SEC from what I've gathered from a lot of their people, could be that if Texas A&M and Missouri are really as unhappy as some people think they might be, they could actually talk to the Big Ten and ask them and fill them out and see what they could offer them to leave the SEC. Now, wouldn't that be some shit? The SEC, the conference that's always starting this shit, it's always starting the expansion moves. They're usually the first one that sets everybody else off. Would it not be pretty ironic if someone came after a couple of their teams? What would they do at that point? Who would they replace? Because Greg said he wanted to go to 16 and be back to 14. Who would they replace Texas A&M and Missouri with at that point? Now let's rewind a little bit back to what we were talking about Greg Sankey not wanting to expand. Now he's saying he's doing this for the good of the game, and that we need to just settle down and collaborate and do its best for college football, yada, yada, yada. But that's hard for me to buy, considering every single time there's been an expansion, the SEC has been the starter of each and every one. 1992, Arkansas, South Carolina. 2011, 2012, Texas A&M, Missouri. And now Texas and Oklahoma. And every time that those expansions took place, the Big Ten followed suit and went out and added somebody. And that's what's happened here recently. So, in my opinion, from what Greg is saying, he's trying to make it out like, hey, let's stop this. Let's get together and start getting along and kumbaya. And sounds strangely familiar like that whole Kevin Warren bullshit that went down a few years back when Kevin Warren went to the Pac-12 and the ACC and said, hey, let's all come together in alliance against the big bad evil SEC and Greg Sankey. Let's all get together. And then boom! First chance Kevin Warren and the Big Ten got, they come in there and they undermined the Pac-12. After they told the Pac-12 they weren't going to expand, they weren't going to raid each other's conferences. They come in, they were the first ones to do it. That's some sorry ass shit right there. Especially as long as the Pac-12 and the Big Ten have been sort of in bed together with the bed of roses that they made with the Rose Bowl. It's pretty sorry to me, but hey, that's business, and they took their word for it, and that's why you get contracts signed and get stuff on paper and get it in writing that you're going to do certain things, which they didn't do with the Big Ten, and the Big Ten just went out and took their teams. I think Greg Sankey is sort of doing the same thing in a way. I think he's like, hey, let's settle everything down. We really can't go out and get anybody yet. We're having to get our bearings about us in this last expansion move, but the Big Ten, the Big 12 are out there going butt crazy. Big 12 went out and got 4 teams. Big 10 went out and got 2 teams way the hell away from their geographical footprint. I just got to catch up, man. We got to calm down so I can get my bearings, so I can make my plans to what teams I want next. It's not that Greg doesn't want to expand, in my opinion. He just don't want anybody else expanding until he wants to expand so he can get the pick of the litter. And if that's the case, and I'm an SEC guy saying this, but if that's the case, if I'm the Big 12 and the Big 10, I keep pushing at least for 2 more teams. I would go out and get at least 2 more teams, each conference. That would put the Big 10 at what, 18, and it would put the Big 12 at 16. I would go out and keep pushing the envelope on expansion. When the Big Ten gets their commissioner in place to replace Kevin Warren, the first thing he needs to do is go out there and get Oregon and Washington, possibly even Cal and Stanford. And then the Big 12 really needs to put a push on for those 4 corner schools. They put the pressure on the SEC. Put the shoe on the other foot for a change so you don't have the SEC just completely monopolizing the sport. And while I'm a fan of a team that's in the SEC, I'm not a fan of monopolization. It's not a good thing. It never has been. But that's a lot of thoughts, man. You know, and going back to Texas A&M, Missouri, nobody's really said anything about that or talked about it. I mean, they have sort of inked around about Texas A&M's unhappy about this, and Oklahoma State's talking about the Big Ten as well. But nobody's really thought about Texas A&M with Missouri, because Missouri, like I said in the beginning, wanted the Big Ten. So if I'm the Big Ten, I don't just try to go after Oregon and Washington. I might try to think of getting a couple of teams that may not be happy with the SEC. Shake the SEC's cage a little bit. Even if you don't get those two teams, the SEC will find out that you tried to get them, and it'll rattle their cage, and it'll keep Greg Sankey on his toes. And that's all I got to say about that. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Sharing is caring. That's most important as well. And as always, there's a little heart down here. If you don't mind, hit that. Throw me a few dollars in the coffers. And as always, KMCA to all the other teams. Class is now officially dismissed.